Just for those that aren't. Okay, awesome. So yeah, Patrick actually came out of retirement. I'm gonna let Patrick tell a little bit more about his background, but was a super successful agent with Remax and came out of retirement once he saw what his son was doing, what Matt was doing with EXP and how his business was growing. And I don't, you haven't explained it this way, but you probably thought something like, I want to play too. You're having all this fun and leaving dad behind, I'm coming.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it has been quite a journey. I started my real estate career in 1984. So I was 20 years old when I got into the industry, spent 7 months at one of the traditional bank brokerages and then jumped to Remax. And, and then I moved into the commercial side of things and, did quite well there. And then Matt was born in 1990. And now a lot of you are too young to remember this, but there was a major shift in the market in the early 90s. And during that period of time, I was still young. I was not even 30 yet, but the investment properties that I owned, the mortgages on them were higher than the value. That's how much things had plummeted. And at the time, I was carrying 80 to 100 listings at Remax. Okay. So why is it that I had so many commercial listings? It's because when I went commercial, I went 100% commercial. And about 75% of my business came from the hundreds of Remax agents in my city because they knew that I wasn't going to compete with them. So I had a ton of listings, but a lot of them were small, like 800 square feet of office space here, a restaurant for sale there. It was all those little transactions that really added up. But here was the problem. I was renting 2 offices. I had a full-time assistant on my own salary. And, I started turning away listings because my signage costs were so expensive. Put up those 4x4, 4x8 commercial signs on corners of properties, and when nothing was moving. And to make a long story short, on paper, I probably should have went bankrupt, but I didn't. I arranged a small loan from my father, got through it. And, it's interesting now that we've seen a downturn in the market, because for my boys, Matthew and Michael, they've never seen a downturn in the marketplace, right? Well, I've gone through about 4 of those. And so long and short of it, I ended up in 1999 with a Remax agent and another Remax colleague. We formed a company called Webco. Now, do you guys have Exit Realty in your market?
We do.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay. So I apologize, just getting over a little bit of a cold here. But Exit Realty was created in Kingston, Ontario, 2 hours from here. And we noticed that they weren't really growing that strong, but they did have something new to us, and that was an agent attraction bonus. Okay. And we studied their model and we said, it's not a very good model. 70-30 split, one level agent attraction. We kind of liked the idea of the passive income, but we said to ourselves, it doesn't make any sense because, Jeff, if you sponsored me into Exit, you have 0 interest in me sponsoring other people. Why? Because if I got good at it, I could retire with residual income. And the minute I stop doing transactions, you make nothing, even if I bring in 100 people into the company. So we said to ourselves, why don't we create a company? We called it Webco, and we created a multi-tier agent attraction bonus. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's when our business consultant said, guys, we found a little company out of Austin, Texas, who's already done this. And we said, what's the name of that company? They said, KW stands for Keller Williams. Now, back then, nobody had heard of Keller Williams up here. Okay. In fact, Keller Williams had not even started international expansion at that point. So anyways, to make a long story short, next thing you know, we're meeting Gary Keller in person. We get a tour through one of his offices and we drop our idea. My business partner brought Keller Williams into Eastern Canada. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was 22 years ago. So flash forward to 2015. I'm on vacation. I meet Rob Flick. What are the chances, right? We get talking. I find Rob was in real estate in the 80s. That's when I got started. He then mentions Keller Williams. And he said he joined Keller Williams because he had got cancer. And he survived the cancer, but he said if the cancer ever came back, he wanted residual income and he liked their profit sharing model. So I said, I met Gary Keller. My business partner brought Keller Williams to Eastern Canada. Do you happen to know the name Jeff Hooper? He says, yeah. Isn't that the guy who opened up? I said, yeah. And Rob looks at me and he says, do you still know agents in Canada? And I said, of course I do. My son just got started. Now think about this. This is 2015. Rob isn't even in EXP. 2 weeks prior to me talking to him, he was at Gene Frederick's lake house learning about the model. And Gene was trying to talk him out of retirement, saying, because Gene had just sold his region and 6 offices out of Keller to join this little company called EXP that had 500 agents and was trading as a penny stock. And Rob says to me, he says, my wife thinks I'm crazy, but I'm actually thinking of coming out of retirement. Okay. And that's the story of how it happened. So then what happened was this. Rob Flick ended up joining in January 2016. And he introduced me to Gene, who I introduced to Matt. And they then introduced us to Glenn Sanford. And we just said, hey, listen, we'd love to bring this into Ontario and the rest of Canada when the time's right. And that time was right in midway through 2017. Okay. So if anything, my background from the 80s being at Remax, meeting Gary Keller, creating a multi-tier profit sharing plan ourselves, which never launched it. It kind of gave me a good background to say, hey, you know what? This EXP thing looks brilliant. Let's get to work. Okay. So what I'm going to do, Jeff, can I share my screen here?
Yep, I believe I unlocked it already.
I'm going to bring this up and you guys let me know if you can see this. Can you see it? Okay. So here's what ended up happening. When we got started, I was already retired and I had to go back and get a license. So I said to my son, Matt, who had only been selling real estate for 2 years, I said, Matt, it's going to be wrong for you to just put some focused effort into the revenue share, because there's what we call 3 wealth building pillars at EXP. Number 1 is increased production. Use the training platform, use the KV core, and get your transactions going. Wealth pillar number 2 is the stock. Wealth pillar number 3 is something called revenue share. So I said to Matt, I said, at 27 years old, your focus needs to be on wealth pillar number 1. I said, wealth pillar number 2, the stock, it'll take care of itself over time. And wealth pillar number 3 is a long-term thing, but I'll tell you what, I'll go and get licensed. I'll learn the model. And what we'll do is we'll create something called the 95-5. Okay. And now what's happened is that it has worked. We've been doing this for 5 years, and I'm going to share with you the progress that's taken place. But what does the 95-5 mean? Well, it means that 95% of Matthew's time was spent on his core business of selling real estate. And that's what we're training our agents now on our team to do. Spend 95% of your time in production and just 5% on agent traction. But what we're going to do is talk about working smart with that 5% of your time, okay? And some may ask, well, why should I devote 5% of my time to agent attraction? It's because this could eventually surpass your core income of transactional sales, okay? If we do this correctly, and we have several people on the team right now who have done this, and what a luxury it is right now, especially in a market that's shifted, to know that there's cash flow coming in. So this is a great pension plan for your retirement as well. So if you take a look at the definition of passive income, I'm sure everybody has a good handle on that. But what is really the present value of 100,000 a year of passive income? Well, you'd have to have $2.5 million invested at 4% to have that type of return. So I always say to people, yes, it does make good sense for you to have a separate business plan for your agent attraction. Okay. And this is something that separates us from the industry, because always real estate's been about taking listings, working with buyers. You get to a certain level, maybe you're going to build a team. Okay. And of course, you have a business plan for that. But I maintain that with the EXP model, it makes a lot of sense to have a business plan set in place for agent attraction. So here's what took place. We started our journey in July of 2017. And in that period of time, Matthew and I both thought we would have 40 or 50 people on our tier one. We were that convinced of this plan. And here I am in January of 2018. So this is 6-7 months after we've been pounding our head against the pavement. And I was having a round of golf with Gene Frederick and Rob Flick, and Brent Gov was there, and a bunch of other agents. And I'm saying to Gene, like, I look happy in this picture. I'm always happy on the golf course, but I was not a happy camper with where our EXP business was. And I said to Gene, I said, you know what? I don't know what the heck it is, but we are having a very, very difficult time attracting people. Like in that period of time, I think Matthew and I had only attracted 4 people personally. And for me, it was devastating. It was like, I said to him, I said, I'm not sure if this is going to work in Canada. He said, Patrick, he said, it has nothing to do with it being in Canada. He said, you're pioneering a new market. And see, I was sitting front row in the stage there in Puerto Vallarta, taking notes, meeting all the top leaders, and I'm seeing people being congratulated for, hey, my team just hit 100 agents. My team just hit 500 agents. There's a couple there that had teams of over 1,000 agents. And Gene said to me, he said, Patrick, it's like in Texas, when we start selling out a subdivision, we start with a trailer in a field. And then he said, when the roads go in and that first model home goes up, there becomes more interest and activity. But then as the subdivision begins to be built, that's when the masses come in. And he said, son, you're at the trailer stage right now. You and your boys are working hard. You're at the trailer stage. And he said, the people that you're seeing on stage right now, they were at the trailer stage a couple of years ago. Now they're at the model home stage, right? So he was bang on. So what I did was I put together a plan, and we started working it. And I'm going to share with you the results of that, okay? And then what I'm going to do is kind of roll it into the systems and the foundational building blocks that we put in place to achieve this. So again, it was July 2017 we started. In that 6-month period, we had personally brought in 4. So the blue is our personals, the 8 is the team, and the orange here was the total monthly revenue share in that 6-month period, okay? So, it didn't even pay for my trip to Puerto Vallarta, right? So then the following year, though, after coming out of that training and coming back and putting a lot of these things into place, 2018, notice that we only brought in 6 more personal, but the team grew to 100. Why is that? Because we started working with people on our team, okay? That year, the income turned into a respectable 61,000. Now, don't keep in mind, this is the passive income. This is over and above Matthew's transactional income. Here's an interesting situation that took place, because the following year, again, we only added a handful of agents, but the team grew from 100 to 400. That's when the revenue share went over 6 figures. But this year, 2020, was pretty remarkable. That was the year we began some of our international expansion. And this is when Matthew hired a coach, and the coach said to him that, Matthew, it's going to cost you money to be selling real estate. Matt said, what do you mean? He said, well, you're sitting on your passive income has now surpassed your transactional income. Maybe you should create a team. So my youngest son, Michael, joined the team. They hired a couple of other agents. And basically, Matthew started, doing a lot more of the agent attraction side of things, and look at what happened the following year. Okay. So I have to update this slide because at that point in time, we were in 8 different countries. So our organization has now spread into, Matthew told me the other day, 12 countries. And it's like over 1,700 agents. So the bottom line here is that if you take a look at the blue, okay, that's the personal, and there's no arguing. That's just slow and steady, okay? So if you build this slow and steady, the rest of the numbers will take care of themselves, okay? So let's talk about, basically the foundation building blocks that we put in place to achieve this, because it's in our best interest right now to, basically shorten that learning curve for all of you, okay? Because we win when you win because you're on our team. So our objective here is really just to be totally transparent, and let's figure out what's working the best so that everybody can start growing faster, okay? So here are the 4 steps, building the foundation and setting goals, creating your master list and using the CRM Grow. And this is something fairly new to us, but it's a 3-step business evaluation, an invitation, and then the sorting process and cost analysis. So let me see here. I've got to hit this one here. There we go. So we have this saying in our company, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And this is the model that's really about educating versus selling, or what I like to call the soft tell versus the hard sell. And we've seen a lot of EXP agents out there make mistakes just by getting too overexcited about the model to the point where their prospects aren't even listening to them, okay? So really it's about educating agents on this. And for this, you really need to get organized. So here's a few things to bookmark. If you're a new agent with us, you may not even be aware, but you've got your own website for agent attraction. It would be your name.exprealty.careers, bookmark expworldholdings.com, life.exprealty.com. These are resource sites. Brent Gov has an incredible resource site. I don't know, is anybody going to Maui in January?
No, we're not. I'm not going.
No? Okay.
We're going to Cabo in March.
Oh, you're doing the Cabo. Okay, that'll be just as good. We're going to the Maui one in January. But anyways, Brent holds a couple of agent attraction events every year, and his site is a great resource. And the reason for these is that as you begin the prospecting process, you're going to be using these sites, okay, as reinforcement with your prospects. Now, I'm not going to get into a lot of this right now, but I do have a training manual that goes along with this 95.5 training where I go into more detail of the disruptions of Remax and Keller Williams and Exit. And these are the 3 major companies that I believe you should have a good understanding of. And the other thing, Jeff and Lynn, I just finished this book called The Wealthy Agent. I started it last year. I've made a few changes to it, but I'll send you a draft copy of it. And it's really a talk about the major disruptors that have taken place over the last 50 years. Remax being a major disruptor, Keller Williams being the only company that's disrupted Remax. And then, of course, Exit Realty really doesn't come into the conversation that much as a disruptor, but the fact that they have an agent attraction bonus means that exit agents love our model. We've had exit franchise owners not renew and convert their offices over. So, you know, one of the key things to being successful is really understanding the value proposition of our model. And the traditional real estate career is very stressful. No pension plan and only 2 income buckets. Okay. Now, this is the type of conversation, especially now, that you could be having with prospective agents for them to at least have a look at our model. Because at EXP, the difference here is that we have a model which creates a business asset versus a career with no pension plan. And it's these 5 buckets of income: the stock, the dividends on the stock, and the rev share that compound year after year after year, that literally makes the difference for retirement for many agents. Okay. And not just that, but these are willable assets. So we are talking about changing generational wealth for your family. And if we take a look at what's taken place with this, and this is why I wrote the book, because EXP is the fastest growing brokerage in the history of you know, the real estate industry. And what it boils down to is ownership. And this is a real easy conversation to have with agents, because if you're doing a deal with a Century 21 or a Remax agent or Coldwell Banker or whatever, you know, for years we've known that it makes sense to own instead of rent. Yet all of these real estate agents are renting their brokerage, and we have an opportunity to show them how building equity can really change things for them. So one of the key things here, and I won't go into a ton of detail here, but it's important to understand how we get paid. Okay. Now then the reason I like to show this chart is that there's many agents who don't understand the power of this column called expansion share. So you'll notice there, it's the 7 tiers: expansion share and exponential share. And the more people that you bring in yourself personally, it unlocks these tiers, with the maximum being 40. Once you have 40 frontline qualified agents, that will unlock all 7 tiers. But notice this column here, expansion share. Expansion share means that you get paid all of that money regardless of how many people you've brought in personally. And notice tier 2 is 0.2%, and tier 3, 4, and 5 is 0.1. But notice tier 6 is 0.5 and tier 7 is 0.5. Now, the reason I point this out, okay, is that you do not have to become a recruiting superstar to make a 6-figure annual passive income from revenue share. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's been agents who joined us 4 or 5 years ago who have only recruited 2 or 3 agents. But see, what's happened is their tier 2 started opening up, their tier 3 started growing, and they may have had, you know, a top producer come in, like maybe like a Randy Dick in Canada who joined us. He's personally brought in, like, I think 80 agents, for example. Well, if you get somebody like that who comes in, before you know it, on your tier 6 and tier 7, you're going to have hundreds of agents. So can anybody tell me what 0.5% is of a capping agent doing 80,000?
Yeah. 4,000.
$4,000.
400, 4,000.
400. 400. Okay. So 0.5% of 80,000 is your $400. All right. Now, here's the interesting thing. Matthew now has something like over 300 agents on his tier 6 and about the same on his tier 7. And we did the math because last year he did not have those tiers unlocked, but he made something like $160,000 just on those little 0.5%. Okay. Tier 6 and tier 7. So isn't that good news for somebody who's looking at this and saying, I don't think I can recruit, 25, 35, 40, 50 people here. You don't have to in order to basically earn a passive income of six figures. You just have to be in the game long enough. Okay. And then that begs the question, well, where are we going to be? And here's the bottom line. We are just on the runway of getting started because these tiers are not just for Utah. It's not just for the United States or Canada. It's global. Okay. And as Michael Valdez, our president of global expansion, is going to take our country or our company rather into over 100 countries. We're just on the verge of getting started. So the company breaks everything down for you. And this is a snapshot of Matt's back office from, I think this was from sometime last year, but you'll notice here, okay, the numbers they're now over 300, but back then he had 265 agents on level 6 and 224 on level 7. And that's income that he's getting paid on those little 0.5%, even though he did not have all of those tiers unlocked. Okay, so the numbers can really begin to add up, and this is where it comes down to having a goal. And the goal that we have set for ourselves, and other agents doing this, if they want to achieve that six-figure passive income, is attempt to bring in 5 agents a year on your tier 1, because after 3 years, that's going to equal 15 agents on your tier 1. And we have enough data to know that if you do that, you should have approximately 200 agents, okay, on your 2nd to 7th tier. And this will create some substantial income for you. So now let's talk about how do we do this? Well, again, it's just like anything else in real estate. It becomes a numbers game and a ratio. So if we take a look at 50 exposures and have a 10% conversion, that's going to equal 5 agents. So if we have a weekly goal of exposing this to 1 agent every week, if you do the work, the numbers will take care of themselves. Okay. So again, it's just a little bit at a time. And this is where getting organized becomes really important. We use a system called CRM Grow. It was created by an EXP agent. And it's a CRM pre-loaded with all of the EXP videos, and then you can create your own videos and upload your team videos, etc. And what this does is it allows you to gives you real-time analytics when somebody opens up one of your emails and watches one of the videos, and it shows you to the second how much of that they watched. Okay, so here's what I always suggest to people is that it can be overwhelming to try and understand all of this stuff, but if you just take one little bite at a time and add your first 10 prospects. So if you're brand new, think of who are the agents that you know, like, or that know you, like, and respect you, and put them into your system. Okay. And don't start prejudging. Don't say, oh, they're a top producer, they won't be interested, whatever. Just add them in there. And then what we're going to do is create labels A and B. Okay. Now, some people get a bit more sophisticated, but I tend to like to keep things real simple. And then what you do is you create what we call a master list from your warm market. So use memory joggers like old transaction files, business cards, real estate board rosters, real estate ads, maybe agents that you worked with at a previous brokerage, past referrals, met at conventions and trainings, or met while on traveling on business or vacation. And this is a list, a live list that you will continue to build on. And then there's cold market, day-to-day interactions. Like you may get a call today from a Coldwell Banker agent for a question on one of your listings. Okay, these can all become contacts, social media connections, and then referrals. Okay, I love referrals because I've had referrals from my dentist, my lawyer, my accountant, and friends, family, etc. And it's as simple as asking them, hey, who do you know who's a great real estate agent? All right. Get these referrals in place. And I always like to talk about this story here. Jeff and Lynn, I'm not sure if you've heard this story before, but I had attended a training. No, here's what happened. I'd come from one of the EXP events in Las Vegas, and my wife and I, we rented a car and we were going to drive down to Scottsdale, Arizona for a training with Rob Flick. On the way, we stopped in Sedona because we had never been to Sedona. And while in a cafe on a Sunday morning, I tried the Rob Flick special. I'm standing in line with this older couple. We're waiting for a table. And I just said to them, do you happen to know of a good real estate agent in this area? And they said to me, oh, yes, Chris Anderson. She's the best. She sold us our home and blah, blah, blah. So this lady's name was Robin. So Robin was kind enough to write this lady's name out on a card for me. And, you know, I called up Chris Anderson and I said, Chris, I was talking to your friend Robin. He's a client of yours. And she tells me you're one of the best in Sedona. And I said, you know, I would like to share an idea with you. And I introduced her to EXP. Okay. And it's interesting how this whole conversation went because she had recently just read an article in Inman News about 3 of the top brokerages in San Diego coming to EXP. And long and short of it, she was intrigued to get some information. And this is back in a time when I couldn't even give a presentation. So what did I do? I got Rob Flick on a 3-way call with her 2 days later. And then the following Monday, Rob went and met with her and her team. And at that made the decision to transition to EXP. So she's now 4 times Icon agent. Last year, her team did $100 million in volume. Okay. So again, you just never know where these circumstances will come from. Matt last year was in Playa del Carmen, met a guy in the apartment where they were renting. Turns out this guy's originally from Vancouver, selling real estate down there. Now this guy is in EXP. Matthew and him have formed a team, and they have like 5 or 6 agents on their team selling in Mexico. Again, these are all just kind of like coincidental, you know, interactions that you can turn into business opportunities. So when we started off in the business, Matthew and I, like, he would connect me with people and I would get on a presentation, and sometimes those presentations were an hour long. Okay. What we realized was then we were having agents on our team set up Zoom meetings with us so we could do presentations. And then, you know, that was resulting last year when I was in Mexico. Some days I was doing 5 or 6 presentations, and, you know, I was going to bed at night, you know, with the presentation going through my head. It was just crazy, you know, doing all these presentations, right? So then we shifted gears and we said, we could make this easier on ourselves, and we could also make it easier on our teammates, because it could become a lot easier for somebody on our team just to introduce an 8-minute video. Because what we realized was this, is that in 8 minutes, you can give somebody enough information to know if they'll be intrigued or not. And so if they're not going to be intrigued after 8 minutes, what's the point in taking an hour of their time and our time to go through all the details of the presentation? So we shifted gears and we created this new system, and it's called the 3-step business evaluation. So step 1 is an intro video. It's 8 minutes long, and the whole premise of it is to intrigue them to see if they're an A or a B. So at the end of it, I even say to them, you know, if you're an A, get back to the person who invited this to you so they can share with you the next video, which is the model explained. If you're a B, thanks for your time. So in other words, we're allowing that prospect to decide whether they're intrigued or not. Okay. So step 2 is the model explained, which is 20 minutes. And what happens in there is that we go through the 3 wealth building pillars. But here's the interesting thing. When we tested this out, through the CRM Grow, what we realized was this, was that about 85% of the people who watched the 8-minute video, they then immediately watched the model explain and watched the entire 20 minutes. And see, I can tell you for a fact that if we had combined these two into one 28-minute video, the amount of people who would have shut it off 2 minutes in would have skyrocketed, because they would see that, oh, do I really want to take in half an hour and listen to this? And, people today, they just don't have the attention span. So by dividing it up this way, what it does is it's allowing the prospect to digest this, and they determine whether they're interested in going to that next step. The third step is actually when we meet in person, or Zoom, most of them are Zooms, for what we do, for what we call a cost analysis and answering their questions. Okay. So again, this is something that, I think just in the last 4 or 5 months, I've given one live presentation. I always let the videos do the heavy lifting, and then spend my time on doing cost analysis. So here's how we do this. Do not email information as a way of introducing EXP. So you go to your list, personally call your prospects. They need to hear your and feel your enthusiasm. And here's the key thing: do not talk too much. So if you're going to use our system, what your objective is to get them to watch the first video. And what we've found is this: the most effective prospecting techniques in order are to do it in person. The second best way is Zoom. And if you cannot get an in-person meeting or a Zoom scheduled, that's when you would go to number 3 and say, okay, I'm going to email you the video. When do you think you'll have a good time for you to watch it? And I'll schedule a follow-up call with you. But if you send it through CRM Grow, you will be able to find out whether they've watched it or not. So that's kind of like the default is number 3. And Jeff, you've heard Brent Gove speak many times, right?
Yep.
Okay. Remember what Brent used to do to build his business? He would have meetings with people, and then he would call it the push and play, right? So he would be in person with somebody, and then he would play a video, and then let the video do the talking for him. And the reason for this is that it's a third party validation, but it also makes it very duplicatable. In the event that that person likes the model, they realize that they don't have to learn everything. They can literally just play a video to explain things. So as you go through this process, you're basically going to end up with an A list and a B list. The A list are the ones who are intrigued, and that's when you're going to say something like this: congrats, Sue, on being an A. I thought you'd be intrigued. Here are the next steps. I'm going to send you some more information so you can begin to understand our model and culture. As you go through the material, make a list of questions, and let's set up a Zoom meeting in a few days. I'll arrange for one of our experienced shareholders to be on the Zoom to make sure all your questions are addressed. When I was looking at EXP, they offered to do a cost analysis and stock projection based on my previous year's sales volume. This gave me a clear indication of the savings and what I would have earned in equity. Why don't we do the same for you? Sorry, I just got to plug in my computer here. And so with using this system, the more people that you have go through this and we do cost analysis, it's just getting them across the finish line, because at this point they have all the information that they need to make a decision. And then if you're free to use myself or Matt for these meetings, and I'm not sure who on your team there in Utah, Jeff, is doing cost analysis and the whole bit. I'm sure you are. But whoever on the team is able to do these types of meetings, that's where you want your team members to basically have somebody to connect with in order to take it over the line here. And, at this point, you've given that prospect everything that they need to know. And now they're in decision-making mode. And, they're either going to be preparing to transfer their license. And if they don't do that, move them from your A list to your B list. And this is where, just kind of wrapping things up here, is that I like to call it, there's gold in the B list. When I go back and look at it, 40% of our tier 1 agents came from the B list. So it's very, very important to have a follow-up system in place, because take a look at this. If you're following the system and doing 50 exposures a year, that means you're going to have approximately 5 agents join, but you're going to have 45 who said, no, this isn't for me. Thanks for the information, or I'm too busy, or I'm happy, or whatever, right? So you've got 45 on the B list, and then year after year after year, look at what ends up happening. So by cultivating this B list, what takes place is your sponsoring ratios are going to continue. And it's interesting now, because with this market shift, it's a darn good thing we have this system in place, because we're starting to have some people on our B list from 2 or 3 years ago who are actually reaching out to us, okay? Because they kind of remember the residual income, or because the market was so hot that it was hard to get agents to think about moving when they were making so much money, okay? So I hope all this makes a lot of sense. And then, it's important to have a drip campaign. So, what we do with the B list is every 2 to 3 months, I'm going to send out maybe a press release from eXp World Holdings, and include, a new video overview, et cetera, and just to let them know you haven't forgotten about them, because this is a way of keeping in touch. And here's the reason for this. I've had agents, who call me up and say, oh, I can't believe this person, they just joined eXp, and I talked to them 2 years ago. I said, well, do you have them on a drip campaign? He said, no, I never got around to that. I said, well, that's the importance of having a drip campaign. You need to keep in touch, okay? It's just like if you had potential sellers and you know that they're going to be selling sometime in the next 2 or 3 years, you want to keep in touch with them. And, if you drive by their house someday and you see, your competition's for sale sign on their lawn, that you've lost out, especially like if you have not kept in touch. So here's the interesting thing, was that at the Orlando conference, the shareholder summit, Michael Valdez came out and he said 500,000. He said in the next 5 years, we're going to be in 50 countries and have 500,000 agents. Considering that we just hit 87,000 agents, that means we have 413,000 more agents to go in the next 5 years. And this is why I think it's critically important, for agents to have a business plan together for this agent attraction. And that's, it's exciting times. I'm kind of happy for the market shift, to tell you the truth. It's actually given agents something to think about. And more than ever, what I'm finding is that agents are now willing to take the time to learn about our model. So that's basically my spiel there. Why don't we open it up to questions?
Yeah, that was really awesome, Patrick. I love the way you've done so much over the years since 2017 and kind of whittled down the process to be more effective as you've moved along. Seems very duplicatable. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask Patrick?
I want to say something that I really got from it was I loved how you pointed out that you don't have to be, this machine out there recruiting like crazy, because what you said, I've seen it. I've seen people that have recruited like 1 or 2 people and they've got massive checks coming in. And then they see it and they're like, oh my gosh, I should have been doing this all along. Then they start doing it, right?
Yeah, I know personally too, a couple of people that have 2 or 3 people that they've recruited over the years, and they have over 500 in their organization that came from those 2 or 3 people.
It can make such a huge difference. I mean, you take like my mom, for instance, is in her 70s, and her residual that she gets from being in Keller Williams has made a drastic change in her life. And EXP is so much better than that. Like they pay out so much better. But yeah, let's open it up to everyone else. I'm sure they have lots of questions.
Yeah, Jeff, that was the first thing I noticed, his little 25 in 2020 grew to that large number, which is to Lynn's point. Patrick, one quick question I have for you is, you're using CRM Grow as a supplementary system to KV Core, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that focuses on agent growth, KV Core obviously is on your customers on the real side.
Yes, CRM Grow is, you can look it up online. It's a subscription service, but it's specifically geared for this. An EXP agent made it for contacts, follow-up, drip campaign, and I haven't used it. But what I like about it is when you send somebody the video, they open it through the program, so it's showing you what they watched and how far along they got through, so.
Our CRM system.
Yeah, for sure, tools.
Well, hey, one other question, Patrick, I tried to take a picture of this, but I didn't get it before you changed the screen, but you said we each had our own personal first name, EXP Realty /careers website. Could you show that one more time, possibly?
Yep.
So the website for EXP that has the application on it is join.exprealty.com. It's a duplicate site of that has your name on it that you can send to people.
Let's see if I can find it here.
The URL would be the same for everybody. I can't remember. That's why he's looking it up.
It's your name.
To your
I
name.
tried to plug it in, I think.
Yeah, I'm just having a hard time here going backwards.
Just remember it's something dot careers at the end.
Yeah.
Career.
Mhm.
Okay, so
It's www.yourname.exprealty.careers.
should see it there.
No, that's one.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thanks, Patrick.
Who else?
Would Patrick
Chuck.
be willing to send this presentation out to us so we can review it ourselves?
Could you hear that, Patrick?
Yeah, so I think this has been recorded, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so probably the best would be just to send the recording out. That's cool.
Yep, I'll do that. And he's changed it over time. I've seen earlier, version draft of this, and if I'm not mistaken, I posted it in our Team Limitless Facebook group, which will make sure we get you in, where we talk, a lot about our trainings and upcoming stuff. But yeah, I'll get this uploaded to YouTube and on our team page, and then put a link in there for you.
I updated the manual as well, Jeff, and so I'll send you a draft of the book that we have,
Perfect.
the manual, because again, the importance of that is really just for those who really want to kind of do a deeper dive into the understanding of the disruptions that have happened over the last, because when you can start having some really intelligent conversations with agents, it opens them up to learn a little bit more.
Well,
Because-
and I like the way you've broken it down to a short video at the start too, to gauge that interest.
Yeah.
Because we all meet people that or attract people into our life, and it'll come up. And if all we do is stammer and hem and haw and don't really know, what to be telling them, it can be a turnoff as well. And so I really like it, and starting with that and then moving to the second one.
Yeah. The analogy that I use, because I kind of lived through this, is that, when there's a hurricane, there's the eye of the hurricane, and in the eye of the hurricane, everything's calm, right? And in 1984, when I was starting off in real estate, I look back on it now, and I was in the eye of the hurricane, because as a young 20-year-old agent, I was just trying to figure out how to sell real estate and survive. Okay. But for the banking divisions, like in Canada here, we had Canada Permanent Trust and Royal Trust and Montreal Trust. They were fighting to keep their agents because of this hurricane called Remax that had come into the marketplace. And all of a sudden, they were starting to pick off the very top producers from all of the banks, because the banks had these top producers on 60-40, 70-30 splits. And it was typical that a top producer who might make $200,000 or $300,000 was giving over $100,000 in commissions to the broker. And Remax came in and changed all of that. And that's what happens when there's disruption. Okay. So when I take a look at it now, I think the vast majority of real estate agents in the last 2 years, because the market's been so hot, okay, they're in the eye of the hurricane. But if you worked at the headquarters of Remax, at Keller Williams, Reology, that's the parent company of Century 21, Coldwell Banker, Sotheby's, Better Homes and Gardens, and all that, you've known about this hurricane for the last 4 or 5 years, because you've seen guys like Michael Valdez leave and come to EXP. You've seen some of the top Keller Williams teams and Remax teams in the world come to EXP, right? But the average agent on the street is just starting to kind of like, I wonder what's going on. I'm starting to see more signs. I'm starting to see this and that. So there's always this lag behind. And then when you can have that kind of conversation with an agent, and now they're open-minded to sit down and take a look at the model, well, again, it's that it comes down to that saying, once you see it, you can't unsee it. You know, Glenn Sanford said something so powerful, and he says it at every convention. He says, when they designed the model, they designed it in such a way that it would be irresponsible for an agent not to have their license at EXP. And I truly believe that, because if you follow this system, just stay with the company and collect your stock year after year and do a little bit with revenue share, there's nothing that can beat it. Nothing.
No, even just doing a little bit, it turns it into the situation where they're literally paying you to be at this company
Yeah.
in pretty short order too.
Yeah. Like I've got tons of agents who are making, you know, 3, 4, 5,000 a month. Others making 9, 10,000 a month. You know, and here's the crazy thing: we have agents on our team making more than us in revenue share. So they're in our group, okay, but their revenue share checks are higher. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that kind of dispels the myth of, oh, I should have got in earlier, or I missed the boat, or the opportunity is not the same for me, because somebody that joins 2 years from now, 3 years from now, has the same opportunity to surpass anybody that's been in it since you have, right?
Exactly.
So, you know, whenever someone says that, I just think that's their excuse for not doing something. If they keep telling themselves it's too late, then that's just an excuse that lets them off the hook from doing anything.
Yeah. Exactly. No, that's why I always point out that, you know, we're just on the runway right now. Because when, like, I had a guy, so London, Ontario is the market where Matt works out of. And there's this guy that I showed this to like 4 years ago. And he basically came to me because now he sees EXP signs everywhere in the whole bit. And his conversation with me was, I'm kicking myself in the butt. I should have joined you then, but I've missed the party. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, there's no more room to grow. I said, you don't really understand this, do you? He says, well, what do you mean? I said, well, it's you're not talking about your particular market. What we're talking about here is a global market, and we're just getting started. And furthermore, there's still tons of room in the local market, because again, you know, I always say this is that even though people have they've started to hear about EXP, try and find somebody who can explain it, who's not in the company. They can't. They don't know about it. And here's the crazy thing: there's the vast majority of people in our company right now still can't even explain how the revenue share works, or even the stock program, because it's complicated, and most agents are focused on that wealth pillar number one, which is increased production, which is fine. That's what we're here to do, is sell real estate, right? But that's where it's important to realize that, hey, we can work as a team here. You can leverage people like myself, like my son Matt. We have Gene Frederick and Rob Flick. Like, we brought Gene in on a call the other day on a Saturday. I was meeting in Toronto with a broker owner with over 300 agents who's looking to make a switch. We had a lunch with Glenn Sanford when Glenn was in Toronto the week before, and I texted Gene on like 9 o'clock Saturday morning. Hey, Matt and I are going into Toronto today. Would you have the time to pop in on a Zoom meeting with us? He was back to me in like 5 minutes and said, absolutely, no problem. Send me the link. He says, I'm free. Like, to have access to resources like that is huge. And everybody in that room, you've got access, to leverage that to help you build. We work as one big team.
It's just a matter of putting it on your radar too, because then the opportunities to have those conversations happen, but they won't likely happen if you don't know what to do. And so I appreciate your time in explaining all this, because it makes it duplicatable for one, it makes it easy. Anybody can say, well, hey, I know you've got some questions about EXP. Let me just send you a quick 7-8 minute video, or sit down with them. Like you said, is better to watch it with them, but 7-8 minutes, anybody really has that amount of time to just take a look at something.
Yeah, that's what we found, is that the 8 minutes is kind of like a cool number. Most people have 8 minutes.
Well, and the growth potential is going to be there for many, many, many years to come. It's like I use Eric as an example a lot, how he's onboarded a couple of people in Israel, and the first response is, how in the world did he get agents in Israel? And the only thing I say is, it's somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody.
Yeah.
And then Eric hooked him up with the broker in Israel. It was that easy.
Yep. Jeff, I'm going to have to hop off, because I'm supposed to be on that 1 o'clock call that Matt's organized through the collaborative movement.
Yes, absolutely. I appreciate that. I'll be in touch. I'll let you go. Thanks, Patrick. Appreciate you.
Right.
Thanks, Patrick.
All right. Ciao.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See ya.